Today, we're going to be talking about what consensus analysts say are the biggest reaches of the 2025 NFL Draft. We'll start from smallest to largest, and for each player, we'll look at both sides. Starting with the negatives, we'll discuss why they were ranked so low on the consensus big board, aka the consensus view, but then we'll talk about the player's upside and why they should have been drafted where they were ultimately taken, aka the NFL's view. There may be some things you want to know, like what makes a player a reach and so on and so forth, so I'm going to throw a graphic on the screen right now that explains all of that, so feel free to take the time to read it. Otherwise, let's jump right in. We start with Alabama guard Tyler Booker. I hardly know her. Ranked as the 28th best player on the consensus big board, but taken in the draft at number 12 overall in the first round by the Dallas Cowboys, a consensus reach of 16 spots. Although on its face, 16 spots doesn't look that crazy, the media has thrown the reach label around when talking about Booker so often that this video would be an inaccurate representation of the NFL versus consensus rankings if I didn't include Booker on this list. So why are some of the consensus analysts saying that Booker is one of the biggest reaches of the draft and a head-scratching pick, with some even labeling it the worst pick in the draft? Consensus had Booker ranked around the 28th pick in the draft due to a combination of three things: athletic limitations, scheme and position specificity, and lack of positional value. On the first point, Booker has shown to be a pretty poor athlete both on and off the field. On the field, his feet were described as sluggish, and Booker was even characterized as being, quote, one of the worst athletes to be drafted in the first round in decades, end quote. At the Combine, Booker did nothing to stop concerns about his movement, as his 40-yard dash was the second worst for offensive linemen, and his 10-yard split in broad jump were both dead last compared to every other offensive lineman. Not just guards, every offensive lineman. But even just against guards, and outside of his own draft class, Booker's numbers don't look good. His 1.96 second 10-yard split ranked in the second percentile, 5.38 second 40-yard dash in the 15th percentile, 94-inch broad jump in the third, and his 7.96 second 3-cone and 27-inch vertical jump ranked in the 28th and 29th percentiles. This led to a combine athletic score of 56, which, since 2003, is the 8th worst athletic score for any guard drafted in the first 3 rounds. To be more fair and compare him to players of his size and weight, his relative athletic score doesn't look much better with a 3.68. This ranked 1,094th all-time of 1,730 guards since 1987. But why is being slow bad for an offensive lineman? Well, for many reasons, but in short, as a pass blocker, it'll be difficult to mirror quicker defensive linemen or recover laterally against cross-face moves, and as a run blocker, it makes it difficult for Booker to reach second-level blocks before the running back makes it to his spot, or to pull across the formation and lead block, or to square up defenders in space to open up rushing lanes. But the lack of foot speed and overall athleticism brings us to our next point, which is scheme and position specificity. Booker won't really be able to kick out to tackle, because as a tackle, you have a lot more ground to cover, and he'd get eaten alive on the edge by speed rushers. This means he's pretty much stuck at one of the 2 guard spots without much versatility. Additionally, he lacks the quickness to block well in a zone scheme rushing game, limiting him to only playing in a gap scheme rushing game. In theory, it shouldn't pose a problem if you're already a primarily gap scheme rushing game, but think about the future. If Schottenheimer gets fired and a new head coach comes in that wants to run primarily zone rushing concepts, the new coach has the difficult decision of either changing the scheme and having Booker struggle to play at his best, or limiting his own play calling to maximize Booker's talents. And as much as you want to play to the strengths of your players, you don't necessarily want your entire offensive game plan and future team building to be determined by an offensive guard just because he was taken at number 12 overall. That segues into the last factor, which is positional value. Even with guards who are versatile enough to kick into tackle and play in any scheme, there are always questions about whether taking a guard in the top 12 is a good use of resources because of the relatively lower impact that guards have on a team's success and the relatively lower cost to get a guard on the market. This especially comes into play with Booker, who's considered a plug-and-play starter, but one who probably has a limited ceiling because of his athletic and schematic limitations. So although he could be a very good to great starter, the argument is that teams should take players with higher ceilings at positions that cost more to acquire outside of the draft, and positions that contribute to winning more. The other argument is that, if the Cowboys were dead set on Booker, they should have traded down and taken him in order to recoup some of the lost value. I think some of these arguments underestimate the difficulty in finding a trade partner, while also making sure that you're getting the right value for the trade, and keeping yourself within range to still take the player, but the overall point is that the Booker trade would have been received more favorably if there had been a trade back because of the same thing, the perception that taking a guard high up is a poor use of resources. Given that 8 offensive linemen were taken in the first round, it's possible Booker wouldn't have even been there if they did trade back, but some analysts disagree and believe that the Cowboys overreacted to the loss of Zach Martin by drafting Tyler Booker. But those analysts aren't NFL scouts, and NFL scouts had a ton of reasons to love Tyler Booker and value him at number 12 overall. First, the guy's absolutely massive, especially for a guard. At 6'4", 321, he's in the 63rd percentile for height and around the 80th percentile for weight. Unlike most guards, he has excellent arm strength, as his 34 7/8 inch arms are in the 95th percentile, and his 84 1/4 inch wingspan is 96th percentile. Paired with his gigantic 11 inch hands, 98th percentile, he absolutely dominates defensive linemen in small spaces due to his large area of influence. And he used that frame to be an elite, consistent guard at the highest level of college football for 2 years. Booker was a 2-year starter at Alabama his sophomore and junior seasons, and was an award winner in each of those 2 seasons, being named second-team All-SEC in 2023, and then both first-team All-American and All-SEC in 2024. In his 27 games as a starter and 38 games played total, Booker played 2,007 offensive snaps. Despite playing in the SEC, on 1,035 pass blocking snaps, Booker only allowed 2 sacks and 27 non-sack pressures. In 2024, he earned an 86.5 pass blocking grade and only allowed 9 total pressures and 0 sacks on almost 400 pass blocking snaps. Even having almost 30 games of starting experience and over 2,000 snaps played at a high level in the SEC, Booker's only 21 years old, and despite his age, he shows excellent technique and the strength to absolutely eviscerate opponents. It's scary to think that as he grows older, he's only going to get stronger and more technically refined. But even if he stays exactly where he is now, he's basically a plug-and-play, high-floor starter for the Cowboys who will be a fixture on their offensive line. Not only does he bring his experience and immediate starter impact, but he also has a great mentality towards the game. Booker said that his favorite thing about football is taking other people's love of football away from them. He called football legal assault. He's not the only Alabama guard committing assault, but credit to Booker for at least keeping it on the field. But Booker brings the same intensity off the field, as he also takes great pride in his leadership abilities, telling the Cowboys that they didn't just get a guard, they got a culture changer and a leader. And this isn't him just saying shit. An NFL scout had this to say about Booker. Quote, "He keeps everyone accountable in the locker room. After Alabama's Vanderbilt loss, Book was the guy who got everyone back on track." End quote. And holding them accountable is right. Jeff Howe tweeted that before Alabama's bowl game, Booker got in front of the team and said that anyone opting out had to explain themselves to him. And with all of these teams facing the issue of bowl opt-outs, Alabama certainly didn't have a problem this year, as no one opted out. But Booker held himself to that same standard, injuring himself in practice in the week leading up to their bowl game, and he played through it, showing that this dude is demanding of others, but he demands a lot of himself too. No wonder why Booker, an offensive guard, was named a team captain, and no wonder he went 12 overall. So although all of that stuff is wonderful, it pales in comparison to the last reason that the Cowboys specifically viewed Booker as worthy of the number 12 pick, the Great Wall of Tylers. Before 2020, when the Cowboys selected interior offensive lineman Tyler Biotish, Dallas had never drafted a player with the name Tyler. Since then, they're practically addicted to drafting players with the name Tyler, especially over the last 4 years. 3 out of the Cowboys' last 4 first-round draft picks have been an offensive lineman named Tyler, and now they'll all play together to make the Wall of Tylers 3/5 complete. Cooper Beebe better watch out, man. The Ravens just declined Tyler Linderbaum's 5th-year option, and I heard he's looking for a new home in Dallas. And he's also looking to play for the Cowboys, hence the new home. Come on, guys, keep up. In their criticism of this pick, consensus scouts clearly underestimated the value of the Tyler Wall, and this is why they'll never be NFL scouts. And that shows with the next Tyler they ranked too low. Louisville quarterback Tyler Shough. I hardly know her. Ranked as the 70th best player on the consensus big board, a 3rd-round value. In the 2025 draft, fans were shocked when he was selected by the Saints right outside of the 1st round with the 40th overall pick, a consensus reach of 30 draft spots. To be fair, Shough may be happy that it's only 30 spots, because once this clip of Shough throwing at the combine went viral, he legit fell about half a round down the consensus board. Luckily, he picked up some steam again before the draft, but not enough to stop people from calling this pick a reach, amongst other things. Shough has one of the more, let's call it, unusual college careers, which started in 2018 at Oregon. There, Shough sat behind then college junior, now 5-year NFL veteran Justin Herbert for 2 years, until he'd finally get his shot to start in 2020, where he largely disappointed, ultimately leading to him transferring to Texas Tech in 2021. His 3 years with Texas Tech would also go poorly, but for a completely different reason: injuries. In 2021, he'd break his collarbone in week 4, ending his season. He returned in 2022, only to re-break this same collarbone, causing him to miss 6 games. Then, in 2023, Shough broke his fibula, ending his season yet again in week 4. In total, Shough played only 15 games for Texas Tech, missing 24 games due to injury across his 3 years there, and up to that point, had only had 562 pass attempts to his name across his 6-year college career, which is less than 100 attempts per year. On his last leg, both eligibility-wise and literally because he was recovering from a broken fibula, Shough would transfer to Louisville for the 2024 season, where he finally managed to stay healthy for a full season, leading to him breaking out and showing the world why he was once considered the heir apparent to Justin Herbert at Oregon. We'll certainly discuss this breakout season when we talk about the NFL's view, but sticking to the consensus view for now, you can no doubt already see why he wasn't ranked as an early second-round pick. Alongside obvious questions about his ability to stay healthy, Shough played 7 years in college and will turn 26 years old in September of his rookie year, making him the oldest quarterback drafted since the legend Brandon Weeden, and the 4th oldest quarterback to be selected before the 6th round. For reference, Tyler Shough is 8 days older than Trevor Lawrence, who has played 4 full NFL seasons. But despite being a much older prospect, Shough also doesn't have the benefits that you usually get from drafting an older prospect. Unlike a 5-year college player like, for example, Bo Nix, who played in 61 games and attempted almost 2,000 passes, or even Jaden Daniels, who played 55 games and attempted almost 1,500 passes, Shough played in 42 games, starting 32 of them, and attempted less than 1,000 career passes. What this means is that, despite being an older prospect, Shough is actually somewhat inexperienced as a quarterback. Consensus scouts believe that this showed in his play, citing shaky decision-making, inconsistent accuracy, especially in the short game, poor play under pressure, and a tendency for holding the ball too long. Many of these points are supported when looking at his PFF grades, as against the 10 other qualifying quarterbacks from the 2025 draft class, Shough found himself ranked 9th in total adjusted completion percentage under pressure, and adjusted completion percentage on short throws. Another criticism from many consensus analysts is that Shough's injury has had a permanent effect on the way that he plays the game. For lack of a better way to describe it, analysts have said that he too often plays like he's afraid to get hit, and that he'll bail early from clean pockets, his mechanics and decision-making break down when faced with pressure, he won't stand in and deliver throws, and he'll check down the ball early against pressure looks instead of letting the play develop. Problems like this lead to some of the more ridiculous plays you'll ever see, including maybe the worst play I've ever seen at the college level. With all of these issues, but the traits to become a starter, a younger player with the same on-field profile as Shough would typically be labeled as a developmental prospect. But as a 26-year-old, a 3-year developmental window means that he'll be about 30 years old by the time he reaches his ceiling, assuming he can even hit it. Which is another question that inevitably comes up when looking at his profile. How much room is there for growth if he didn't show it in 7 years of college? But never mind growth, you also can't really even be confident in his floor either, because as a 1-year breakout, there's no backlog of production to feel confident that Shough is at least as good as his final year. Instead, it's always possible that it was an outlier, and he's closer to the player that he was before he played at Louisville. So yeah, an injury-prone, 26-year-old developmental quarterback prospect with only 1 year of high-level production is not necessarily the player you think of when you think top 40 quarterback prospect, and consensus reflected that in its ranking of Shough at 70 overall. But to be honest, the fact that he sat at number 70 on the consensus big board and would eventually find himself taken at number 40 overall, despite the laundry list of concerns, shows you that there is a lot of upside for this player if he can put it all together. At 6'4 and 7/8, Shough is exactly the same height as Josh Allen, and he's arguably more athletic in that Shough's 4.63 40-yard dash beats out Allen's 40-yard dash of 4.75. Although Shough admittedly doesn't bring the physicality in the run game that Allen does, analysts describe Shough as having surprising athleticism to extend plays and pick up yards in the run game. Shough pairs this athleticism with excellent arm strength and the ability to throw from different arm slots, allowing him to make throws on the run and off-platform deep downfield or across his body. These tools increase Shough's margin for error when he's off, but increase his ceiling when he's on, as his arm strength, according to some scouts, allows him to access all parts of the field, even late in the down. Although there are some concerns about his accuracy under pressure, analysts note that Shough is also a very accurate quarterback in a clean pocket. In 2024, Shough used his tools and playmaking ability to put together a 3,915-yard and 23-touchdown campaign, leading to being named Comeback Player of the Year by college sports communicators. Shough had a career-low interception percentage, throwing only 6 interceptions on almost 400 passes, had the third lowest turnover-worthy play rate in the 2025 draft class, and led the entire draft class with a 75.4% intermediate adjusted completion percentage. So, in a post-Josh Allen world, where you saw Allen come out of college with questions about decision-making and accuracy, but elite physical traits and a hard work ethic, you can maybe see now why someone would want to take a swing on Shough, who despite not having the elite tier arm strength of Allen, fits the mold of a big, strong-armed quarterback with the ability to throw off platform and play out of structure. Shough certainly seems to have the mentality to develop as well. Going through what he's gone through, falling out of favor with 2 programs, suffering multiple season-ending injuries, and being on the brink of saying goodbye to football forever, Shough's statements to the media make clear that he's ready, willing, and able to handle all adversity that comes his way. In his own words, he won't be fazed. The guy also apparently has 4 degrees, including a master's degree. And before you say, well, yeah, he was in college for 7 years, of course he has degrees. He graduated with 2 of those degrees only 3 years into college. Another thing that's important to note about Shough is that all of his injuries were broken bones rather than anything having to do with tendons or ligaments. I am not a doctor, but my understanding is that broken bones in and of themselves don't usually signal injury proneness or make the body prone to more injuries in the same way that injuring a tendon or a ligament would. Dude just needs to drink some more milk.
He needs some milk!
Looking at where he was drafted, it's possible NFL teams felt that his durability wasn't as big of a concern as consensus analysts made it out to be, especially because NFL teams have doctors that actually look at all of this stuff. All in all, although there are concerns, I don't think the Saints deserve the media clowning on them for this pick as much as they have been. I mean, look at some of these headlines. Panthers fans can only laugh as the Saints draft Tyler Shough. Saints save Browns from embarrassing blunder. Saints set Kellen Moore up for failure. A fireable offense for Mickey Loomis. This is not even mentioning the shitstorm for taking Shough over Shedeur Sanders, which is a whole other can of worms. Given the billions of articles and comments on that point, we'll have to make sure we compare their careers when we come back around to revisiting this draft class, but ultimately, this is one of the most polarizing picks of the draft and players. An injury-prone, 26-year-old developmental quarterback prospect with only 1 year of high-level production, but with the elite frame, high-level arm strength, playmaking ability, and work ethic to have a ceiling to become a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Who do you think will be right? NFL or consensus? But if you think the Tyler Shough pick got dunked on, maybe one of the more dunked on picks was the Cleveland Browns selection of Dillon Gabriel with the 94th pick in the 3rd round. Of course, just like Shough, people were shocked and appalled that Gabriel was taken over Shedeur Sanders, making it a fascinating battle to revisit later on, made even more fascinating by the fact that Gabriel and Sanders are on the same team together. But we're not going to Mel Kiper this bad boy and talk about Shedeur. Let's give Dillon Gabriel his spotlight. Gabriel's consensus ranking of 178 overall put him as a 6th round projection, so ultimately the pick was a reach of 84 spots according to consensus. Gabriel's poor consensus rating is almost solely based on the perception that he has a low ceiling. In the 3rd percentile and 7th percentile respectively for height and weight, 5'11", 205, Gabriel also lacks the desired size for an NFL quarterback, but unlike a Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson in his prime, Gabriel doesn't compensate for his lack of size with other tools, as consensus finds his arm to be below average and found that he was only a solid runner. Also, Gabriel didn't really demonstrate the playmaking ability of either of those guys or any of the high-ceiling quarterbacks in the game. Instead, one of the knocks on Gabriel is that he's often cautious to a fault, passing up high-risk, high-reward throws for easier, safer throws that get less yards, as evidenced by his 3.2 big-time throw percentage, which is the lowest big-time throw rate of the 11 qualifying quarterbacks drafted this year. Further, his average downfield pass in 2024 traveled only 7 yards, the 7th lowest in the FBS. To top it all off, Gabriel is currently 24 and will be 25 in his rookie season and has played 6 years of college football. What this means is that Gabriel kind of is what he is at this point. As an undersized 24-year-old with a poor arm, he isn't getting any stronger. He's certainly not getting any taller, and with 6 years of college experience, you assume that he's really not far away from his ultimate ceiling, so there isn't much room for growth. This is reflected in consensus's 6th round value of Gabriel, as most analysts projected him to have quality backup upside, but no real starter potential. But obviously, the Browns completely disagree with that assessment, because you don't pick a backup-only quarterback in the 3rd round, especially when you have an open competition for the quarterback spot like they do. To be fair to them, there's a lot to like about Gabriel. Scouts praise his pinpoint accuracy and ball placement, as shown by his rank of 1st in the nation with an 81.9 adjusted completion percentage and 81.3 on target rate. Gabriel has also played long enough at this point that he's practically seen it all, which shows in his ability to accurately read defenses and quickly get the ball out to the correct read. As a 6-year starter, Gabriel's 63 games started is the most ever by a college football quarterback, and over that time he logged over 2,100 passing attempts and had an extremely productive collegiate career. Gabriel's 155 passing touchdowns are tied for first in FBS history with Case Keenum, and his 18,722 career passing yards and 19,931 total yards rank second all-time. He also never threw more than 7 interceptions in a season in college. So, with his accuracy, experience, processing, and ability to quickly get the ball out, Gabriel projects as a high-floor player who can operate as a team's field general, keeping the offense in rhythm, converting the plays in structure, and taking care of the ball. But unlike most other field general type quarterbacks, Gabriel also has the added quality of being a solid runner of the football, giving him some additional upside to create on the ground. In light of those strengths, the Browns aren't bothered by his height, as both Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski told the media that they don't believe Gabriel's height had a negative impact on his game as a whole. The operative question here is whether Gabriel's current floor is worth a third-round value, because as an older and undersized player, he doesn't have as much room to grow as most other rookies do. Consensus doesn't believe that his floor in and of itself is worth a third-round value, but the Browns apparently did. What do you think? While you're thinking it out, let's turn to our next player, who joins a long line of reaches against the consensus board made in the third round during the 49ers' Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch era. As you can see on screen, with their 15 separate third-round picks since 2017, the Niners have only not reached against the consensus board one time, last year, when the Niners selected Dominique Pooney, who's been a really great pick for them. Otherwise, the 49ers' draft reputation in the third round is a meme for a reason. Besides Fred Warner, who obviously surpasses a third-round value and is the best linebacker in the NFL right now, the players on this list have been disappointments, some more than others. Ty Davis-Price, a 128-pick reach against the consensus board, was cut in his second season after carrying the ball 40 times for 120 yards and no touchdowns. Cam Latu, a 76-pick reach, missed his rookie season with an injury, then was cut in August before his second season started. And Jake Moody, while he is a kicker, so it would already be hard to meet a third-round value, and he's been very underwhelming so far. Ranking him at 170 overall, a fifth-round pick, consensus scouts believe that Oklahoma State linebacker Nick Martin is yet another third-round reach by this regime, as Martin was taken in the third round, 75th overall, 95 spots ahead of his consensus ranking. Martin's low consensus ranking is caused by a few things: lack of size, lack of starting experience, and the fact that he's coming off an MCL injury. In terms of size, at 5'11", Martin is in the 6th percentile for linebackers, and at 220 pounds, he's in the 2nd percentile. This shows up in his struggles against the run, as his lack of strength causes him to get washed out of rushing lanes by blockers and fail to finish tackles at times, evidenced by almost 16% missed tackle rate in 2024. It also shows up in coverage, where his lack of height makes it difficult for him to man up against tight ends. But even when he does find himself in position, in coverage, or in the run game, his 33rd percentile arm length shows itself in his struggles to shed blocks at the point of attack, to actually get the ball carrier, or his ability to contest the catch point in coverage. But outside of his size deficiencies, which hurt his ability to get to the football and finish plays when he does read it outright, consensus has further concerns about whether he can even read it outright in the first place due to over-aggressiveness and lapses in play recognition. On this point, consensus argues that he bites on play fakes, struggles to see route concepts developing in coverage, will overcommit to the wrong gaps, and he's over-aggressive in his pursuit angles to ball carriers. These concerns are supported in his PFF grades in both facets, as Martin was barely over a 60 in both categories. Another concern with Martin is that he's pretty inexperienced, having only started a year and a half with Oklahoma State before suffering a season-ending MCL injury in 2024. That is, of course, another concern, because Martin's game is largely built off of his athleticism, and he'll likely spend at least some of his rookie season trying to feel comfortable playing at full speed again after not having played a game since September of 2024. With that being said though, Martin is looking to keep the current trend going, and by the current trend, I don't mean third-round draft disappointments for the Niners in the Shanahan-Lynch era. I mean third-round hits by the Niners at the linebacker position since 2017, as the Niners are currently 1-0 in that department with the Fred Warner pick. Martin actually looks up to Warner. According to him, the only NFL jersey he ever bought is Fred Warner's, and he watches Warner's tape all of the time. With Warner's teaching, Martin has the athleticism and high motor to potentially justify this draft pick for the Niners. As for athleticism, even coming off his MCL injury, Martin was able to test and got an 8.52 relative athletic score. With a 4.53 40, he was in the 89th percentile in 40-yard dash, and he came in with the 87th percentile in the 10-yard split, 86th percentile with the vert, 81st percentile in his broad, and his 26 bench reps were both in the 81st percentile and the most of any linebacker at the combine this year. The athleticism shows on the field in Martin's sideline-to-sideline range to meet running backs at the edge of the formation, his closing burst to finish plays, and his ability to take speedy ball carriers from behind.
What?
Which is no better shown than by the play where Martin ran down Xavier Worthy, the record holder for the fastest 40-yard dash time ever. But he's not just athletic, he's a menace on the field, earning the title of the most violent linebacker in the draft for a reason. Martin flies as if he was shot out of a cannon and lays his body on the line to deliver devastating hits to offensive players. He just generally brings a lot of energy to the field with some back-breaking hits and with celebrations after the plays, hyping up the whole defense. Martin leads with more than just celebrations though, as he was a two-time team captain for Oklahoma State, called their defensive plays, and was reportedly taken by the Niners because they were specifically looking for a player that demonstrated his level of leadership and communication skills. Martin's leadership and character off the field and his energy and violence on the field led to him becoming a player that the Niners couldn't bear to be without. And there are certainly counters to many of the consensus concerns. Despite his size and lack of experience, Martin earned Senior Bowl Defensive Player of the Week and was an extremely productive player while on the field for Oklahoma State, especially in his junior year, where he was all Big Ten after a season with 140 tackles, 7th in the FBS, 83 solo tackles, 3rd in the FBS, 16 TFLs, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and 6 sacks. In 2024, he was on pace for 3-digit tackle numbers yet again until the injury. And even with the injury, Martin was able to test at the combine and is healthy for training camp, so there isn't as much injury concern as was probably baked into the consensus analysis. Given the opportunity, Martin has a high chance to work out for the Niners, as many reports indicate that he was taken as a direct Dre Greenlaw replacement. We broke down Greenlaw's career in one of the 2019 Consensus Reaches Revisited videos, but Greenlaw was very low on the consensus board because of his poor size. That hasn't stopped Greenlaw from becoming an elite linebacker prospect and earning a huge contract with the Broncos this offseason. This is great news for Nick Martin, because Martin is actually the exact same height. Admittedly, Martin weighs about 20 pounds less than Greenlaw, and his arms are almost a full inch shorter. But with Martin's violent, high motor playstyle, athleticism, and coaching from Fred Warner, what's to say he can't be the next Dre Greenlaw? Shanahan and Lynch are already making the comparisons, which you can see by the quotes on screen. So, with that said, are you ready to buy in? Do you think that consensus was too low on this player, and the Niners were right to take him early? Or do you think that Martin's concerns are too much to overcome, and he's just going to be another third-round draft bust in the Shanahan-Lynch era? Similar to his last name, Arkansas wide receiver Isaac Teslaa has been a polarizing topic. Despite being ranked 168 on the consensus big board, a 5th round pick, the Lions traded away pick 102 and 2 future 3rd round picks to move up to select Teslaa at number 70 overall. So, on top of the extra 2 picks for the trade, this was a 98 spot reach against the consensus board. Both sides of the Teslaa argument are pretty clear cut, just like someone's fingers who owns a Cybertruck. Starting with the consensus view, Teslaa is an older prospect who's still raw and a player who failed to produce at the D1 level. Teslaa, now 23 years old, has played 5 years in college, 3 years for a D2 school and 2 years for Arkansas. Although he put up some monster numbers at the D2 level after switching from quarterback to wide receiver, he was never able to consistently contribute at the D1 level, as, in 2023, he ended the year with 34 receptions for 351 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, in 2024, he ended the year with 28 receptions for 545 yards and 3 touchdowns. So in total, across 25 games for Arkansas, he only managed 62 receptions for 896 yards, an average of less than 36 yards per game, and 5 touchdowns. From 2023 to 2024, although he gained more yards, he was actually targeted far less, going from 64 targets in 2023 to only 36 in 2024. Looking at more advanced metrics, Teslaa's yards per route run of 1.98 in 2024 ranked 140th in the nation. Consensus attributes this lack of production to Teslaa's raw skill set, as the common criticisms of Teslaa are that he struggles to get off press coverage, he struggles to separate in his routes, and he didn't run a full route tree. Because of his struggles with press, Arkansas played him from the slot on almost 70% of his routes run, meaning that, despite having X wide receiver size, he has practically no experience as an X wide receiver, making the learning curve to the NFL even more drastic. For a big-bodied wide receiver, he also has a small sample size of catches in tight areas, only catching 4 passes in the red zone in 2 seasons at Arkansas. So, in consensus's eyes, Teslaa was an older player who had no proven production and a ton of work to do just to become a viable big slot wide receiver at the NFL level, never mind the even more work he'd have to do to actually become a true X wide receiver. And for these reasons, Even Lions GM Brad Holmes admitted that the Isaac Teslaa pick was the most questioned pick of the Lions draft. But Holmes also said that Teslaa was his favorite wide receiver in the whole draft. Holmes described it simply, quote, "He's big, he can run, he's tough, he's smart, he's a hands catcher, and he blocks. And he plays special teams. And that's why we were excited to go and get him." End quote. Holmes is certainly right about plenty of that. Teslaa is big. At 6'4", 213, Teslaa is almost 90th percentile in height and 80th percentile in weight. He can run too. Teslaa's 9.97 relative athletic score is 11th all-time for wide receivers at the combine. This size-speed combo is not only rare, but it gives him an elite ceiling. Further, based on my research, he also seems to be as tough and smart as Holmes says. Teslaa's nickname as a kid was MM, short for military man, because according to this article, if Teslaa was given an order, the instruction was followed with a fervor that would make any commander proud enough to consider a smile. That same mentality helped him develop another skill cited by Holmes, his ability to catch with his hands, as apparently his father drilled into him the idea that he must always catch with his hands. This is evident in his tape, as Teslaa uses his 10-inch hands to make contested catches and bring in passes outside of his frame, a skill set that should be expected to continue, assuming he never buys a Cybertruck. In fact, Teslaa didn't drop a single pass in the final 2 seasons at Arkansas. His toughness can't be questioned either. Apparently in his junior season at Hillsdale College, before he transferred to Arkansas, Teslaa had a broken hand and hid it from opposing coaches and defenders by wearing XXL gloves. Not only did he successfully hide it, but he played with the broken hand and had a massive season with 68 receptions for over 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns, earning Great Midwest American Conference Offensive Player of the Year. His past history, in combination with reportedly great showings at his interviews with teams, showed teams that the lack of production on his part was not due to personality or effort issues, and that this guy's willing to put in the work to be a top wide receiver. Again, this is seen directly in statements from Holmes, who admitted that Teslaa has to learn to get off press amongst other things, but Teslaa has the physical tools and intangibles to overcome his deficiencies. So, on one hand, reaching almost 100 spots against the consensus big board to take a developmental 23-year-old who lacks production certainly looks bad on paper and has the potential to be a massive reach. On the other hand, given his size-speed combo, ball skills, and the effort and toughness he brings, Teslaa certainly has a chance to exceed the value of a third-round pick. Of course, that's the question that we're supposed to revisit later on, but let me know your thoughts below. This next pick hits real close to home for me because it involves my beloved Jets. We're talking about Georgia wide receiver Arian Smith, ranked by consensus as the 274th overall player on the consensus big board, a projected undrafted free agent. In his first draft as Jets GM, Darren Muji, a former wide receiver himself, drafted Arian Smith in the 4th round, 110 overall, resulting in a consensus reach of 164 spots. If you know anything about Arian Smith, it's one of two things. He's fast, and he had really poor hands in college, dropping 10 passes in 2024 and 16% of the catchable passes thrown to him in his career. Although the drops are concerning in themselves, this entire profile is riddled with issues that are usually seen in the draft fallers type videos. Age, size, lack of production, lack of refinement, injury history, pretty much everything except character concerns. Smith will be 24 years old in his rookie season and has played 5 years in college football, struggling to carve out a role for himself until his final season. In 4 seasons from 2020 to 2023, Smith caught 20 passes for 539 yards, failing to record a single season over the 200-yard mark and never having a season with more than 20 targets. In those 4 years, he also didn't play very much, only 355 snaps, which shows in his tape in that he's still raw as a route runner and in other parts of his game. Part of the reason he didn't play many snaps is because of a lengthy injury history. Although he's fully healthy in 2024 and 2023, the first 3 years were brutal. In 2020, he both fractured his wrist, requiring surgery, then later tore his meniscus, again requiring surgery. In 2021, he had a shin contusion, then later broke his fibula, requiring a third surgery. In 2022, he suffered a high ankle sprain and a torn ligament, resulting in his 4th surgery in 3 years. Smith was also just a very one-dimensional player. Though he's a very good deep threat in 2024, Smith ran a limited route tree, didn't provide many yards after the catch, only forcing 6 missed tackles on 68 career receptions, struggles to make contested catches, only catching 3 of 18 contested targets over his career, and failed to produce in the short and intermediate portions of the field, only catching 6 passes for 41 yards in the 0 to 9 yard range and 12 passes for 240 yards in the 10 to 19 yard range. Smith was also a very poor run blocker, making it hard to justify keeping him out on the field, committing 5 penalties and grading out with a 58.8 run block grade. And on top of all of this, Smith is undersized. At 6 foot 179, he's in the 35th percentile for height and 7th percentile for weight, while also having 30th percentile and 21st percentile arms and hands respectively. The weight contributes to struggles in contested catch situations, run blocking, and dealing with physical coverage. The size limits his overall catch radius, and when combined with his poor hands catching ability, that means his quarterback has a very small margin for error when trying to get the ball his way. With all of that being said though, Arian Smith has unteachable speed, which he used in his last season to put up 48 catches for 817 yards and 4 touchdowns. At the combine, Smith's 4.36 40-yard dash was the 5th fastest this year and is in the 91st percentile for wide receivers in combine history. But it's not just speed, as Smith actually graded out with a relative athletic score of 9.20, scoring around the 80th percentile in most other combine categories. With his track background showing on the football field and his ability to fly past defenders, he brings an explosive element to the Jets offense. In college, on his 10 career receptions, the average yards per touchdown is a whopping 36.5, showing he can easily get behind the defense and take it to the house. Additionally, of the 119 wide receivers who were targeted on at least 17 passes of over 20 yards in 2024, Arian Smith ranked 17th in passer rating when targeted with a 128.1, 5th with a yards per reception of 59.1, 12th with a yards per route run of 20.24, and at 44th with a reception percentage of 41.2. In reading what people say about Smith as well, the gist I get about him as a person is that he has the intangible quality needed to become a contributor at the NFL level. Jets head coach Aaron Glenn, who saw Jameson Williams overcome his own drop issues in Detroit, points to Smith's self-awareness to recognize his flaws and his tireless work ethic to actually fix them. Admittedly, there's always a bias when a coach talks about one of his own players, so how about somebody who has never displayed bias towards anyone? Jon Gruden! Gruden loves Arian Smith, labeling him as a sleeper wide receiver of the draft, not only because of his speed and athleticism, but because, as Gruden puts it, Smith has been working his ass off. And by all accounts, Smith really is working his ass off, using strobe goggles to help us focus when catching passes every day after practice. Whenever he's asked about this issue by the media as well, Smith always says that he's driven to fix this issue internally, to live up to his own expectations, rather than just to avoid being criticized, which is likely one of the reasons why Aaron Glenn gravitated towards him. So yeah, he does have a really scary profile with a charcuterie board worth of concerns, but perhaps he'll be able to prove consensus wrong. Making our way into the 200s now, we turn to our last spotlight player of the video, Maryland linebacker Ruben Hyppolite, who was ranked on the consensus big board as the 361st overall player, which is more than 100 picks into undrafted free agency. In the draft, the Bears shocked the world, selecting Hyppolite in the 4th round at 132 overall, resulting in a reach of 229 spots against the consensus big board. Because of what has been labeled a massive reach, the Bears have been heavily criticized for this pick. I mean, it doesn't even seem like Hyppolite thought he was being drafted. On his own bio page, he wrote that he wants to be a sports agent. But by all accounts, Ryan Poles expected that this would come as a surprise to everyone. On draft day, Poles was heard asking the War Room whether they thought the draft shows would even have highlights to show of Hyppolite when they picked him. To be honest, it was a fair question. Hyppolite was not invited to the NFL Combine, was not invited to the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl, was a projected UDFA, and didn't even have a write-up in Dane Brugler's Beast Guide, which is easily one of the most comprehensive draft guides out there. By all accounts, Hyppolite was an unknown and was essentially a lock to go undrafted. Then, his pro day happened. Hyppolite at 5'11", 236 impressed teams with a blazing 4.42 40-yard dash. If he ran this time at the Combine, it would have tied for the 7th fastest 40-yard dash by a linebacker since 2006, putting him close to names like Micah Parsons, Ryan Shazier, and Isaiah Simmons. Once he ran this time, and otherwise earned himself an 8.22 relative athletic score, teams scrambled to get Hyppolite into their buildings, as he reportedly had 15 visits in a span of 2 weeks. But despite the testing, consensus wasn't really all that moved, as the highest he'd rank according to NFLMockDraftDatabase.com was 273rd. Despite having the pedigree of a 4-star prospect and turning down offers from Michigan and Penn State, Hyppolite's college career was somewhat underwhelming. In 5 years, he played about 2,000 snaps across 50 games, starting 47 of them, and ended his collegiate career with 236 combined tackles, 13 TFLs, 3 sacks, an interception, 6 PBUs, and a forced fumble. Hyppolite did consistently get better over time, as in his final 25 games, he had 132 tackles, 10 TFLs, a sack, interception, and 3 PBUs. But his overall peak was still nothing really to marvel at. Hyppolite never ended any season with a PFF grade of over 70, and in 2024, his best season, his 69.2 PFF grade was 93rd of 217 qualifiers, and his 22 defensive stops were 198th. Consensus scouts note that, despite 5 years in college and being an older prospect who turns 24 in September, Hyppolite still has work to do, primarily in becoming a more secure tackler, improving his block shedding, and developing better instincts for the position. In light of these concerns, Consensus viewed Hyppolite as a player with special teams upside, but not really much more. But even with the late meeting with Hyppolite, he reportedly really impressed the Bears in his interview. Supposedly, they weren't the only ones either, as an anonymous NFL staff member said that their team ranked Hyppolite not far below where the Bears ultimately ended up drafting him. Looking at quotes from several members of the Bears staff, it looks like they were really drawn to Hyppolite's maturity and overall character. To them, Hyppolite wasn't just a super fast linebacker prospect, he was a former 4-star who consistently improved across his college career, was a team captain for a Big Ten team, a mature leader off the field and a tough competitor on it, and an experienced player with almost 2,000 snaps played. And also, well, the whole being really fast thing too. In their eyes, as he develops his instincts even further, he can be an immediate contributor on special teams and develop into a starting outside linebacker role with them, which will also allow his athleticism to shine more and hide the fact that he's a bit undersized. In a somewhat weak linebacker class, although it was far from a position of need for the Bears, and many would argue that he was not the best player available, the Bears felt confident enough to take him over 200 spots earlier than anticipated. Of course, it doesn't look justified on his face, but if you believe the things that the Bears are saying about him, you could see upside to become a great linebacker if he can, in fact, put it all together. That is, of course, the question for when we revisit all of these consensus reaches in the future. Now that we're done with our featured players of the video, let's discuss the best of the rest. I'm not going to talk about every single one of these players, nor does this list include every player that is considered a reach, but these were a couple guys that I thought were interesting enough to talk about. Minnesota cornerback Justin Walley was a consensus reach of 106 spots when taken by the Colts in the 3rd round at 80th overall. The knock on Walley is that he's undersized at 5'10", 190, 20th and 24th percentiles for height and weight respectively, but he's primarily an outside corner, having played over 2,100 snaps on the outside and only 62 in the slot over his college career. This archetype is one that's not often seen or successful in the NFL, with some notable exceptions in recent times such as DJ Reed, Darius Williams, and Asante Samuel Jr., to name a few, but most of these guys don't do well generally. As an example, 2023 draft prospect Trey Hodges-Tomlinson of TCU was a monstrous cornerback in college, winning the Jim Thorpe Award, breaking up 30 passes in 3 seasons, only allowing a passer rating against him of 42.5, forcing 21 incompletions, and only allowing a 34.6 completion percentage when targeted. He also had really similar snap counts to Walley, playing almost 2,100 snaps outside and 66 snaps in the slot. In 2023, he was picked in the 6th round and was eventually cut by the Rams. Obviously, one example doesn't mean that Walley won't work out, but the point that I'm making is that for every DJ Reed, Darius Williams, or Asante Samuel Jr., there are dozens of Trey Hodges-Tomlinsons waiting for you, longingly in the distance. The other issue for Walley is that he's a very poor tackler, missing almost 20% of his tackles in 2024 and just over 14% in his career. On the other side, Walley comes into the NFL with a ton of starting experience, and he was pretty damn good. As a 4-year starter, he made 155 tackles, caught 7 picks, and forced 3 fumbles. In 2024, he only allowed a completion rate of 41.8%, and a passer rating of 57.8 against him, the 11th best and 25th best in the nation respectively. Who knows? Maybe he'll be able to contribute. Illinois wide receiver Pat Bryant, taken by the Broncos at pick 74, was a consensus reach of 88 spots. With a 4.61 40 time, he was obviously not going to be a consensus favorite, but it's kind of surprising that the NFL didn't have a problem with this 40 time, given that they seem to put a lot of stock into testing. There are, of course, wide receivers who have succeeded with slow 40 times, Keenan Allen, Larry Fitzgerald, etc., but those types of players are usually players who are high level to elite route runners and separators, whereas Pat Bryant is not really considered a refined route runner or a good separator. However, Bryant does have excellent ball skills, especially in contested catch situations, has very good size, and he tested well in other areas such as the vert and the broad jump, so there is of course potential to prove consensus wrong. Texas Tech offensive lineman Caleb Rogers, drafted by the Raiders 98th overall, brings a ton of experience with him, having started 55 games in college and played over 4,300 snaps across both left and right tackle. However, there are concerns about his lower body strength and ability to anchor against NFL power rushers, as well as his pass blocking in general, as he allowed 28 sacks in 5 seasons at Texas Tech. Tennessee wide receiver Dante Thornton, also drafted by the Raiders, ran a 4.3 40-yard dash at 6'5", 205, which is an absolutely nuts combination of size and speed. But playing in the Tennessee offense where wide receivers run very simplified route trees, he has some work to do to become an NFL-ready wide receiver. Alabama, now Broncos, edge Quandarius Robinson is maybe the most inexperienced player at the edge rusher position to ever enter the draft, with only 370 total defensive snaps in his career. But he was an absolute monster when he did play, earning a 24% pass rush win rate and a 90.3 pass rush grade. Our third Bronco on the quick hitter list, UCF running back RJ Harvey, is very undersized at 5'8" and 205 pounds, 8th percentile and 25th percentile respectively. But he brings with him excellent short area quickness and production. In his last 2 seasons at UCF, Harvey put up over 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns each season, while averaging over 6.3 yards per attempt. The consistent concerns that I see across scouting reports for Harvey are first, that his vision is hit or miss, often opting to bounce runs to the outside instead of taking what's blocked up inside the tackles. Second, that he has poor technique and effectiveness as a pass protector. And third, that he has a lack of long speed to finish off his long runs consistently. Harvey is also an older player at 24, having played 6 seasons of college football and taken almost 600 carries, meaning that he comes into the NFL with a lot of wear and tear and a lot less longevity, which is especially concerning given his shorter size. But there is a ton of hype for him, especially in fantasy football right now, and he has a pretty clear path to get a lot of work for the Broncos this season, so he definitely has the opportunity to show consensus that they were wrong. Because our rules of what constitutes a reach prevents us from considering players picked outside of rounds 1 through 4, there are a couple other players who were considered big reaches that didn't really make the list. So on screen right now, I'll show you a couple players who were big reaches against the consensus board who fell just outside of rounds 1 through 4. But with that being said, we've now talked about the players who, according to consensus, are the biggest reaches of the 2025 NFL Draft. So now, after you've heard both sides, let me know your opinion below. Who are you surprised was taken high? Who would you have disagreed with consensus on and, quote, reached for? Were there other reaches you felt that I should have mentioned in this video, but I didn't? I'd love to hear your thoughts and talk ball with you below. Otherwise, I'd really appreciate a like on the video as it really helps me to grow the channel. But for now, guys, that's it. Later.